Chapter 560. A video shot under abnormal circumstances, no matter how clear it was, would be treated as invalid evidence in a lawsuit. Besides, Fujio already knew who she was up against this time. She wouldn't go to court. Wouldn't it be a joke for a hacker like her to go to court? She wasn't afraid of being rich, but she was afraid of being rich and powerful. Fujio didn't deny the existence of the light. But in this world, there were too many distortions. The younger ones could change their faces and pretend to be wronged after scolding others. Those with power looked dignified, but in reality, no one knew what they were. She couldn't give the other party a chance to retaliate. If that happened, Li Mingran's reputation would be tarnished. Yang Ming was smart. He knew that even if he was exposed, he would still have a way to retaliate. That was probably how it was in China. If a girl was bullied, there would always be people who would jump out and say that there was something wrong with the girl's behavior. What was more frightening was that according to the statistics, a large portion of those who blamed the girl were women. They would use words that you wouldn't be able to imagine. For example, *tch. Fujio had never been kind. She was well aware of human nature. Because of that, she had jumped out at the first opportunity to give Li Mengran the identity of her girlfriend. That way, after the incident, at least no one would accuse Li Mengran of doing it for money. Because her boyfriend wasn't just handsome, he was also rich. At this thought, Fujio lifted her head and glanced at the rear mirror. She couldn't be handsome anymore, she had to be beautiful. The statistics started. It wasn't that easy to infiltrate the live stream platform. On the contrary, because it was online, there were many loopholes. This gave Fujio a certain degree of convenience. A recording was broadcasted on over 10 live stream platforms. Moreover, the accounts that were tied to them were slightly famous streamers. Hence, after the recording was broadcasted, a wave of discussion broke out. *CK, did I enter the wrong channel? No, this is my goddess live stream room, why isn't there a recording? And it's a recording of two men. Previous poster, don't speak, listen carefully. *CK. Disgusting. Where did this recording come from? Who are they talking about? That person mentioned the girl and the results. He said that he controlled the other party's results. This is clearly something that only a teacher can do. Damn it, he's a scum. Tell me, who is he? I'm going to kill him. And the result? What was the result? He only released half of it. Will something happen to the girl? After listening to this recording, I think I need to ask my sister if she has been bullied at school recently. I won't let my daughter only care about results in the future. Wait a minute, look at the comments on the platform. If you want to know more, come to room 009 at 8 p.m. sharp. Everyone would see the last sentence after listening to the recording. That night, people really couldn't even eat anymore. After listening, he went to room 009. All of a sudden, the number of visitors on the platform reached a new height, and it was still increasing. Because there were only 20 minutes left before the live broadcast. In this short period of 20 minutes, not to mention that the person who said these words did not react, even the police would not notice it. Chapter 561. At the same time. In the Qin Group's building, Director Huang, who was about to leave, received a call. Live stream. His brows furrowed tightly. It's really strange. Immediately find out where the person sent this message. Also, send the address of the person's live stream to my phone. Send it immediately. Yes. After the person on the other side finished speaking, he hung up. Director Huang turned towards Qin Mo. I'm afraid before we find Z, there's something I need your help with. Qin Mo arched a brow. Director Huang lowered his voice. An hour ago, someone posted a voice message on the live stream. Listen to it. As he spoke, he pressed his cell phone. Chin Mo listened to the voice message, his side profile still handsome. Play it again. Even though Director Huang was doubtful of his decision, he still did as he was told. Stop. Chin Mo pressed his left hand on the table and stood up. If I were you, I would check the surnames of all the deputies and deputy directors in Jiang City. Lock on to the one with the surname Liu and see how many of them are there. After that, check their schedule for today. Director Huang was instantly enlightened. In the voice message, that person called the other party deputy Liu. Chin Mo's voice was calm, but it was lethal. Deputy Liu is only used in the officialdom. Director Huang felt that his trip wasn't in vain. The youngster in front of him was born to do this. Be it in the past or now, as long as he was around, he would solve cases quickly. Hence, the rate of solving cases in Jiang City was extremely high. But who could have imagined that he would be a high school student back then? Director Huang was excited, he immediately dialed his subordinate's number. But on the other end, Chin Mo's voice didn't change. It's too late. What? Director Huang turned, arching a brow. Chin Mo listened to the voice message, opening his silver business laptop to head to the live stream room. The number of people in the room was unprecedented. Chin Mo glanced at the netizens, glancing up. There's less than 20 minutes left. By the time you find out, the live stream might have ended. Then what should we do? Director Huang might be experienced, but he hasn't been in contact with such cases. Chin Mo was different. He pointed at the screen, his gaze calm. Go downstairs and get in the car. Wait for the live broadcast to start. The various police stations will be ready. Open up a dedicated lane and race all the way to the end. This is the most time-saving method. All right. I'll get them to stand by. Director Huang was starting to panic. It was hard not to pay attention to such a voice message. No one had the guts to fabricate such a thing. This was because if the content was false, the publisher would face imprisonment of more than 5 years. Therefore, this was not a topic that anyone was stirring up. It could very well be true. The tricky part was whether it was real or not. If the content of this voice message was true, this would be a case of student trafficking, and the person involved would not have a simple background. Director Huang might be a little greedy, but he would never do something that crossed the line. Just who was it, such a beast? Chapter 562. The person who posted this isn't a newbie. Chin Mo's voice came over again. The police probably haven't found out who posted this. Director Huang coughed. Everyone is still working hard on this. Working hard until the matter is over. Chin Mo lifted the corner of his lips and pressed the internal line in the office. Call Fatty over, it's not training. Tell him that it's something he's most interested in, tracking hackers. Hackers. Director Huang's eyes widened when he heard that word. Did you just say hackers? Within a day, more than 30 famous online platforms broadcasted this voice recording at the same time. Other than hackers, no one would be able to do that. Chin Mo stood up as he spoke, his long fingers buttoning his coat. He exuded an aura of abstinence from the inside out. 7:45 p.m. There were only 15 minutes left before the live broadcast would begin. Fu Jiu glanced at the time on her watch once more. She lifted her lids towards the dazzling building. Countless celebrities and luxury cars drove in slowly. No one noticed that there was a 24-hour convenience store opposite Pure Color with a great view. If someone took a closer look, they would definitely see that in the dining area near the window, there was an ordinary Odin beside a silver-white Apple laptop. The person sitting in front of the laptop had her face covered. Her fingers were on the keyboard, typing furiously. The crisp sound of the keyboard was very emotional. It seemed like she was playing a game. But in reality, one look at her screen and they would know that she wasn't playing a game. She wasn't playing a game. Strings of code danced in her black pupils, indicating that this was a cyber attack. A place like Pure Color might seem to have a good security system, but the internet was very weak. After all, the more people used the internet, the more loopholes there would be. Especially in the surveillance room, it was easy to find loopholes. Fu Zhou's fingers moved quickly. In less than 3 minutes, the virus was implanted into the system. Of course, she needed to continue the activation of the virus. The laptop couldn't be carried around. But the tablet could. The laptop would be the host and would be left here to conduct the live broadcast. After Fu Zhou was done, she stood up and ordered another order of Odin. She also asked the cashier where the washroom was. The goal was to give the impression that she hadn't left, to keep the cashier from touching her notebook. The cashier felt that Fu Zhou looked familiar, but that was all. It was probably because Fu Zhou was too beautiful, especially when she smiled. Her eyes were like crescent moons. Bathroom. The bathroom is just behind here. Turn left after you go out. Thank you. Fu Zhou curled her lips again. After she walked out, she didn't turn left. Instead, she walked straight towards Pure Color. There were only 5 minutes left before the live broadcast officially began. However, she couldn't go in by herself. She was waiting for Lu Ming, the bait. Time passed little by little. Lu Ming looked at the endless stream of cars in front of him and glanced at the person in the passenger seat. We can't drive in anymore. Get out from here. Chapter 563. Before she left, her mother's words were still echoing in her ears. Don't think that I don't know what you've been doing in school. Your grades have already started to drop. You can't only be happy when you get the last place in your exams. Who is your boyfriend? I'm going to his house and ask his mother. He has to take responsibility for seducing my daughter. Fine, you're not going to call. If you're not going to call, you can just follow Teacher Lu. You can choose between the two. I consider myself an open-minded parent, and I also understand that children who have entered puberty are curious about everything, so they want to fall in love. But look at yourself. You don't even want to go to cram school just to fall in love. Where did you put all the effort your father and I put into you? Li Mingran's words were stuck in her throat. To ensure that she didn't fall behind, her family didn't forget to teach her piano while studying. Every day, her father would work overtime until 9 at night. Almost the entire family's efforts were spent on her. The best products to nourish her brain, the best one-to-one English lessons and the best dressing. It was all for her to enter a good university in a stable state. At times, this stubbornness seemed to seep into her bones. Hence, her mother had always been obedient to her teacher. Even in the end, she would still thank him profusely. No matter how much she cried and refused to go. Her mother still opened the car door and pushed her in. The moment she sat down, Li Mengran felt despair. She wanted to ask for help. But the price of that would be bringing trouble to the youngster. He was the hottest new sports player in the country, be it his results or future, he was like a shining light. If her mother caused a ruckus in school, not only would the youngster's reputation be tarnished, even his results would be affected. The moment he failed, he wouldn't be able to participate in the National League. Such a rule was right in front of her. She couldn't be that selfish. Because Li Mengran was clear that the National League wasn't just the youngster's dream, it was Yao Yao's. Her best friend's eyes lit up when she said those words. That was good. Li Mengran thought as she tightened her grip on the blade in her hands. She would do as that person said on the internet. This bunch of people would probably go to hell. Li Mengran lowered her head. Lu Ming couldn't see the girl's expression, so he didn't notice the hatred in her eyes. Fu Zhou, who had been hiding in the darkness, paused when she caught sight of Li Mengran, returning to her original position. The worst had happened. Fu Zhou's eyes darkened. She knew that Li Mengran wouldn't agree to appear here, which meant that she had resisted and failed. If there were acquaintances around, she would have to be careful not to expose her face too obviously. But these were small matters, the most important thing was that Li Mengran could not be injured. It seemed like she had to speed up. Fu Zhou slid her finger across the tablet, and the virus program was activated. All the cameras turned around at the same time. No one knew. The security guard who went to the washroom did not see the change of position of the camera. Just like that, Fu Zhou, who was dressed like a student, followed Lu Ming into pure color while ensuring that no images would be left behind. At the same time, that scene was broadcasted live on the internet. Chapter 564. The eyes of the netizens, who were looking forward to it, lit up. The comments flooded the screen. Video. There's a video. Wait a minute, where is this? Why does it look so familiar? I can only say this is a nightclub. F***ck. I remember now, this is pure color. There's no mistaking it, this is pure color. Pure color. Fatty glanced sideways at Captain, who was sitting beside him. Chi Nemo crossed his legs and turned his face to the side. His eyes were pitch black and his overly fair skin made him look like a vampire aristocrat. Especially when he gave the order, that lazy and cold aura was even more prominent. Begin the attack, lock onto the opponent. Yes. Fatty was genuinely excited, he had never been like this in a car. How should he put it, MMH? His fingers were trembling. Director Huang glanced at the back of the car. He's fine. He'll get motion sickness at most. Qin Mo's voice wasn't faint. Locking onto the IP address of the live stream on the road would save them a lot of time. The sound of the keyboard clattered. At this moment, Qin Mo glanced down at his phone. He still hadn't replied. 3 minutes into the live stream, the number of viewers had already exceeded 10 million. No one knew how the live stream had managed to capture these images. But from the video, they could see that the person was walking forward. Pure color would enter the carnival stage at night. As she walked around the lobby, there were many beautiful girls, many of whom looked very young. Fu Zhou walked casually, just like the countless people who came to have fun. But no one could tell that she had a camera on her black bow tie. In fact, entering such a nightclub required a full body scan. But Lu Ming didn't. Hence, when Fu Zhou paused, she narrowed her eyes. Fortunately, she didn't bring anything, so she passed quickly. But this way, there was still a distance between them. Lu Ming didn't stop at the lobby. Instead, he walked to the corridor and seemed to make a call. Fu Zhou was just about to walk forward when she heard a familiar voice. F***ck, there are still as many people here as usual. It seems like there's hope for us monks to get rid of our single status. It was Lin Feng. Fu Zhou's eyes widened. She suddenly moved to the side and avoided those people who were walking towards her. It wasn't just Lin Feng, there was also Yun Hu, Feng Shang, and the others. Almost all the Supreme Alliance members were there. Only then did Fu Zhou remember that Manager Feng had said before that he would take them to Pure Color to have some fun so that they could prepare for the national competition in the future. If that's the case, does that mean the Almighty is also here? Fu Zhou's legs were still moving forward, but her mind was filled with many thoughts. Firstly, she couldn't let anyone in Supreme Alliance see her. Secondly, she had to avoid the Almighty. Of course, this was not the main point. The most important thing was the bodyguards in front. It was obvious that the other side of the corridor was not a place ordinary people could enter. Li Mingran's back was right in front of him. Fu Jiu narrowed her eyes and silently counted to 15 before approaching the corridor. "Miss, this place does not allow unauthorized people to enter. Please leave." Fu Jiu looked like she was scared, and she said in a soft voice, "The teacher asked me to come here for tutoring. I must have made a mistake. I'll go somewhere else." Chapter 565. Fu Jiu turned around slowly, but her face was still a little low. But the more she was like this, the more she matched her current identity as a pure young girl. But looking at her school uniform, the corners of Yang Ming's mouth curled up. Anyway, sending one in was the same as sending two in, and he could still make more money. Vice Lu wasn't the only one inside, there was another one as well, and they both liked to be pure. "Student, this is indeed the place for supplementary lessons." Yang Ming showed unprecedented enthusiasm. Fu Jiu didn't follow him immediately. Instead, she pretended to look around nervously. "But this doesn't look like a place for supplementary lessons, and my teacher isn't here. Your teacher and I are friends." Yang Ming already knew that he wasn't the only provider in Jiang City, there were other teachers doing the same. Those people were different from them, and they were just a blind cat running into a dead mouse, and if they could find a dumb student, it would be one. Obviously, Fu Jiu had become a dumb student in Yang Ming's eyes. "Your teacher is waiting in the room in front. He said he has students coming over today." Yang Ming continued, "Your teacher's surname is Li, right? He's wearing a pair of glasses, and he's from number 13 middle." Very good, another accomplice was caught. In fact, Fu Jiu didn't know there was such a person with the surname Li before she came. Since the other party gave her one, she naturally had to accept it calmly. "You know Teacher Li?" Fu Jiu tried to make her voice sound timid. "Of course." Yang Ming laughed. "We are in the same profession. Let's go, I'll bring you in." Fu Jiu pretended to hesitate for a while, and then she nodded. Yang Ming pushed his glasses up, turned around, and smiled wanly. She was really dumb. And at this moment, the people who were watching the live broadcast were all fired up. "Oh, don't let him go. F***ck, no, who's in pure color? Go and save the damsel in distress. The people in pure color won't be watching the live broadcast, right? They're still playing." I said, "Don't worry." Think about it, when the blogger broadcasted this, she knew who the other party was. This is obviously a clever disguise to infiltrate the enemy's inner circle. Now that you mention it, that's indeed the case. But even so, you can hear how young the blogger's voice is. She's still a little girl. How can she face those beasts? No, I'm going to pure color now. Not only could the netizens watch the live stream, but Chin Mo could as well. Then, he seemed to have thought of something, his lips curved up. "Very smart." "What's very smart?" Director Huang was still anxious. "Why is there such a traffic jam? Police officers near Pure Color, go in immediately. If you don't have a search warrant, you can get one later. Who are you afraid of stopping you?" "The Jiang family." Director Huang tilted his head to look at the person beside him when he heard the surname. Chin Mo's voice was calm. "Let them explain the situation and enter. The Jiangs aren't people who only look at benefits." Director Huang nodded, wiping his sweat. With such a huge incident, his heart was about to stop. "By the way, what did you just say about being smart?" Director Huang isn't senile, he knows that every word this kid says is useful. Chapter 566. Director Huang wasn't stupid. She felt that if she didn't do that, the culprit might use his identity to escape punishment or betray us like what happened in the recording. In the end, the female students would be the ones who wouldn't be treated fairly. Sigh, this hacker doesn't trust us, how could we allow these beasts to betray us? That's what I thought. Chin Mo glanced over, his voice calm. The most direct way is that she wanted to save someone. Moreover, she knew that if she released the news, it would attract the attention of the police. By then, she wouldn't need to do anything, the police would take the initiative to arrest her. Perhaps they would arrest her, but before the police arrived, she had the ability to escape. Director Huang's jaw dropped. You're saying that the police are under her orders? Chin Mo didn't reply, a silent agreement. Director Huang fumed. This hacker is too, we'll talk after we find her. Chin Mo glanced at Fatty beside him. How's the investigation going? Fatty looked up with a serious expression. I suspect that there are 2 people involved in this operation. Leader, look, this is the IP address that I've logged onto. It's clearly outside of Pure Color, but the blogger is inside Pure Color. That's weird. It is a little strange. Chin Mo glanced at the heavy traffic in front of him. His handsome face tilted sideways, not knowing what he was thinking. But at this moment, the 2 people in the room weren't aware of what was happening. When they saw Li Mengran, they couldn't hold it in any longer. Just as they were about to make a move, Yang Ming pushed in another person. With a loud bang, the wooden door behind her slammed shut. Lowering her lids, Li Mengran was holding onto a blade, threatening the 2 of them. If you come any closer, I'll kill you. Old Liu, deal with that one, I want to have a good talk with my little beauty. The older one pounced towards Fu Jiu with a lecherous expression. What these 2 people didn't know was that their current state had been completely displayed on the live streaming platform. Outside Pure Color. Chin Mo opened the car door, walking out. He scanned the surroundings, glancing past the convenience store before returning, his deep gaze dimming. Director Huang, you guys head in first, I'll take a look at the opposite side. Since they were already at Pure Color, Director Huang couldn't care less as he charged in. With one hand in his pocket, he pushed open the glass door of the convenience store with the other. No matter what happened, he would always be nonchalant. Welcome. The shop assistant's voice rang out. Then, he looked at the person who had just arrived, and his eyes lit up. What was going on today? If it wasn't a beauty, then it was a handsome guy. Chin Mo's eyes were calm. The more he was like this, the more mysterious he seemed. When he saw the small business notebook on the dining table, his gaze paused. He walked over and asked in a low voice, "Where's the lady who was sitting here just now?" "So you're here to look for someone." The clerk suddenly understood. "She went to the bathroom for a while. She'll probably be back soon." Washroom. Chin Mo lifted the corners of his lips. With such a good view, he was directly facing Pure Color. The computer was clearly running, but it was completely black. It was obvious that it was doing something. Since the host was here. Chapter 567. As for the people inside, they would disappear when the police entered. Therefore, it was best to stay here and wait for the wind to blow. "Sir." The shop assistant stood at the side, puzzled. Chin Mo turned around, his handsome side profile extremely abstinent. "Please give me a cup of Americano." "Aw. Okay, right away." It turned out that he was really looking for someone. He had thought that the other party wanted to do something by touching the notebook. If Director Huang were to find out that they were dashing forward while a certain someone was sitting elegantly by the window of the convenience store, drinking coffee, he would definitely explode in anger. Inside Pure Color, Yang Ming, who had closed the door, felt that the girl he had pushed into looked somewhat familiar when she looked up. But he couldn't tell where he had seen it. Strange. She's so pretty. I should have an impression of her. Yang Ming, who was outside the private room, was still talking to himself. Listening to the flirtatious sounds inside, he thought that as long as he settled this deal, he would have a chance to rise in the future. It was just that Li Mengran was a little fierce. No matter how fierce she was, after today, the rice would be cooked. As for the other one, he didn't have to worry at all. One look and he could tell that he didn't have a mind of his own and wouldn't cause any trouble. Fu Jiu didn't have her own opinions. This sentence sounded like a joke. She turned to the side to avoid the middle-aged man, her fingers on the ground as she lowered her head. Indeed, she looked weak, but in reality, she was doing this so the camera wouldn't capture Li Mingran's face, only capturing the two men. I must have come to the wrong place, you must be mistaken. I'm here for tuition, that man lied to me, he's a teacher. Baby, he is indeed a teacher. The middle-aged man tilted his head and was ready to pounce again. You didn't go the wrong way. If you want to study, I can teach you. Li Mengran didn't expect another victim to appear. She had already thought it through. Even if she had to die, she would not let them have their way. But now, the girl without a knife had obviously become a lamb for them to slaughter. What to do? What should she do? Li Mingran's hands were trembling as she threw the fruit platter over. With a pale face, she shouted at the man who was about to pounce on Fu Jiu. Aren't you afraid of retribution for your actions? Retribution? The man laughed and said, who dares to give us retribution? Little baby, you don't usually watch the news, do you? Don't worry, Uncle will dote on you. Li Mengran retreated frantically. The dagger in his palm was stained with blood. She had originally thought that there was no hope this time. However, in the next second. There was a loud bang. The man who was about to approach her was kicked to the ground. Li Mengran froze, sitting on the ground in a daze. She watched as the other girl, who was originally trembling in fear, tore off her bow tie, using her left hand to support herself from the ground. She leapt up, her left hand grabbing the wine bottle by the side. Using the strength of her arm, she flung it at the man's head. Crack! Wine filled the air. The man couldn't withstand the impact at all. He fainted and couldn't find his bearings. When the other man saw this, his eyes widened in disbelief. His first reaction was to call someone in. Chapter 568. It was then that Li Mengran realized the girl's voice had changed. It wasn't weak anymore, it was cold and sinister, like a devilish beauty that had finally revealed her true self. The higher one's position, the more afraid they were of death. The man glanced sideways at the glass bottle, his face turning pale, his lips trembling. I won't scream. Open the door for me. Li Mengran didn't know those 3 words were directed at her at the start. The girl sighed softly. Miss Li, Li Mengran snapped back to her senses, watching the girl's back view. The girl didn't turn back, her voice much gentler. Do you still have the strength to move? MMH. Li Mengran saw the man lying on the floor, seemingly about to wake up. She immediately stood up, her fingers fiddling with the door lock, hoping that she could move faster. Ka-cha! The door finally opened. Li Mengran turned, her eyes glistening as she looked at the person standing with her back facing the light. The girl didn't lift her lids, only saying, Go out first, the police should be here, you'll be fine. What about you? Li Mingran's heart was still trembling. The girl replied calmly, I'll cover the rear. Li Mengran could only nod, but the moment she stepped out of the wooden door, she heard a loud crack behind her. Why? Li Mengran was in a daze. She was worried about the girl behind the door. Her first reaction was to call the police. At this time, Yang Ming, who was standing at the other end of the corridor, was still smoking happily. However, he suddenly saw a large wave of police officers walking straight towards him. The bodyguard beside him blocked them, speaking to the police. Deputy Liu and Chief Zhang are inside. Even if you have a mission, wait for their meeting. Don't you know where you are, coming here to investigate? Yang Ming took a puff, his eyes devoid of fear. With the two of them around, even if the police arrived, it wouldn't be of much use. Wasn't it the same in the past? Someone had reported them. It was just a gesture of sending the police. However, this time, Yang Ming was wrong. Director Huang took a step forward, his voice heavy. Meeting. I think it's more like a crime. Investigate, no matter who it is, bring them back to the station first. You. The two bodyguards still wanted to say something. In the next second, he was pressed to the ground by four men who had their arms folded. Yang Ming was dumbfounded with the cigarette in his mouth. This is the teacher who brought them in. Fatty held the notebook in one hand and pointed at Yang Ming with the other. When Yang Ming heard this, his face turned pale. The police moved too quickly. It was so fast that Yang Ming didn't even know how their secret transaction was discovered. Li Mengran ran over, tears in her eyes. Hurry, she's still inside, that girl is still inside. Director Huang and Fatty exchanged glances, gesturing for the manager to open the door. This is locked. The manager was sweating profusely. Director Huang couldn't care less. Kick the door down. The two policemen looked at each other, and with two thuds, a loud clang was heard. The door opened. There were lights on inside. Chapter 569. Do. The notebook in Fatty's hand emitted a sound, indicating that he had locked onto his target. He followed the sound and saw a black bow tie sitting quietly on the coffee table. That kind of bow tie was very common, but because of its position, it was very strange. Fatty extended his hand and touched the item inside. A look of great interest appeared on his face. This is actually a small camera. Let's not worry about that for now. What about the illegal customers? Director Huang wants to arrest them as well, otherwise, he wouldn't be able to explain himself when he closes the case. Fatty pointed at the tablet. It's the tablet behind the bow tie. As for where the person is, you'll have to ask those two beasts. Deputy Liu and Chief Zhang's mouths were gagged as they stared upwards. Director Huang reached out to remove their ties. Where are they? Why are you guys so slow? Deputy Liu's face darkened. The criminal has already escaped, and someone broke in to threaten us. He even did such a despicable thing. Is this the police's ability to handle cases? Chief Zhang's gaze was stern. Bring our clothes over first. I think the two of you are mistaken. Fatty pursed his lips and said, we are here to arrest you, not some other criminal. Director Huang had wanted to ask about the hacker's whereabouts, but who knew that the two scum would only berate the police's ability. Now that he had missed the best opportunity, he could only turn to ask Li Mengran, is the girl really in this room? Li Mengran looked at the scene in a daze. Before she came out, that person was still there, in front of the computer. Countless netizens looked at the scene in front of them. The screen went black for 3 minutes. But no one left. Then, the scene showed the police rushing in. This was much more exciting than watching a movie. Of course, when he saw that the two of them wanted to refute him again. The comments once again swept through the entire live streaming platform. I won't say anything else. I request the higher-ups to investigate such a person. If these two people are not sentenced, I will never believe in the saying that good people will be rewarded and bad people will be punished. Don't forget that he has an identity. So what if you have an identity? Let the relevant department see the power of the masses. I say, do you guys have nothing better to do? What does that have to do with you? Maybe that girl did it willingly. The blogger is also interesting. Why do you care about other people's privacy? Trash, get lost. Did you watch the live broadcast? Don't spout nonsense. That child is risking her life with a knife. I don't care what others do, but I'm a mother. This kind of teacher and deputy chief has to be dealt with. I'm not a noble person, but at the very least, I don't want my daughter to experience such a thing. It's the same for me. Although I'm not married yet, as a woman, I want to ask, on what basis can you say that the woman was willing when such a thing happened? Is this the focus now? Shouldn't those bastards be punished? Being despicable is always the passport of the despicable. Seeing the words of the person who scolded me, I just want to say one thing. You are the same as those bastards. Where's the blogger? Where's the blogger? What's next? We have to see the fate of these two beasts with our own eyes before we can sleep well. Chapter 570. Director Huang face-bombed. That's right, the ceiling. But how were they going to get up? Director Huang lifted his lids to look above him. Chi Nemo frowned, as though he was disgusted by the coffee. Forget it if you can't get up. Are you doubting my ability again? Brat. I'll climb up for you to see. Wait, where are you? How do you know about our situation? Director Huang had so many questions that Chi Nemo wasn't interested in answering. He hung up the phone, his other hand supporting his face, his fingertips tapping on the table as he narrowed his eyes. Come on. Let me see who you are. In pure color, the guests on the dance floor didn't know what was happening when a wave of police officers barged in. Then they started knocking on the ceiling, creating a chaotic scene. Fatty was also holding a notebook in his hand. His appearance was very eye-catching. Hence, Lin Feng spotted him from afar, rushing over to pat his shoulder. Fatty, didn't Captain ask for you? Why are you here? It's a long story. Fatty liked to imitate ancient people. It's about Yun, who didn't wait for his long speech. His gaze deepened. Did Captain come along? Ah, that's right. Fatty hollered. Captain is waiting for my report at the supermarket opposite. Lin Feng arched a brow. The supermarket opposite. Let's go, we can't continue with the current situation, let's go see Captain. But that's weird, didn't Captain say he wasn't coming? It wasn't easy for the Supreme Alliance members to leave because there were still police checking their IDs. And at this moment, at the corner of the first floor of Pure Color, there was a commotion. Those who didn't know better would think it was a mouse. But if they listened carefully, they would realize the commotion was coming from the ceiling. After commotion, a person jumped down from the air vent. It wasn't anyone else but Fujio. She was still in her white shirt and school uniform, her messy hair accentuating her beauty. Phew, it's been a long time since I walked through such a tunnel, it's so stuffy. Fujio reached out and brushed her sleeves, but when she glanced sideways, she saw a few policemen checking the other vents. Needless to say, they were definitely here to investigate her. Fujio frowned, turned around quickly, and walked to the elevator. They actually guessed that I would come out from the vent. I didn't expect the Jiangqing police to be so smart. Fujio didn't say what she was thinking. She was glad that she was fast enough to escape before the police started investigating. Right now, she was just like an ordinary customer. She was familiar with the procedure, so she knew that the police would be waiting at the main entrance, so she wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, she stayed in the elevator and went straight to the parking lot in the basement. There was already a skateboard in the parking lot. Fujio used her long and slender left leg to support herself, and just like that, under the cover of darkness, no one noticed. More and more police cars arrived at the scene. Other than the first time, there were also the media and the masses attracted by the live broadcast. Pure Color had never had a day like today. There were people both inside and outside. The car was stuck in a traffic jam. Chapter 571. The crowd didn't seem to be afraid of the cold as they stood outside. The smog created a majestic scene. Undoubtedly, such a scene was beneficial for her escape. Fujio smiled, sliding the skateboard into the bushes. She stuffed her hands into the pockets of her jacket and glanced at the 24-hour convenience store across the street. Then, she strolled over. Even if the police passed by her, they wouldn't suspect a person who went shopping. Director Huang wouldn't have expected that while they were still searching, the culprit had already left Pure Color. In the end, Director Huang had no choice but to call a certain someone. The people below said there was nothing at the air vent. I've searched the entire first floor and didn't find anyone suspicious. Chi Nemo held onto his phone, his voice indifferent. Also, you wouldn't be able to find anything if you searched the first floor. The culprit would have used the underground car park. It's convenient for concealment and entry. Director Huang gritted his teeth. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I'm in a bad mood because you didn't do anything for me. Chi Mo's fingers paused, his tone still indifferent. I have something to do, I'm hanging up. Something. Other than the case, what else could he be busy with? Could it be that the kid had discovered something? Director Huang had to admit that he had quick reflexes in certain areas. Chi Nemo had indeed discovered something. There was something wrong with the person who didn't join in the fun. Instead, he walked against the traffic. Chi Nemo raised his hand, keeping his silvery white phone before standing up. The night sky outside was sinking bit by bit. Pure Color surroundings seemed to have been illuminated by the headlights. The Supreme Alliance members were still queuing up for inspection. Lin Feng was helpless, but he knew he had to cooperate with the investigation. Let them go. It was Wu Zhen. She was dressed in a police uniform, striding in with a police cap on her head. Her gaze swept across Lin Feng and the rest. I know all of them, there won't be a problem. The other policeman was still hesitant. But Director Huang said, the live stream host is a girl. Look at them, which one of them is a girl? Wu Zhen interrupted her colleague. The policeman didn't say anything. He just nodded and let Lin Feng and the others walk over. Lin Feng was still puzzled. He wasn't familiar with this female officer, so why was she speaking up for them? Before he could finish his thought, he heard Wu Zhen ask Fatty, Brother Mo is also participating in this activity, right? Otherwise, the police wouldn't have broken into Pure Color so quickly. Fatty did not know how to lie, so he shifted his gaze to the left. Wu Zhen was smart and broke into a smile. I was the one who suggested that he return to the crime squad when I went to the Qin family. Where is he now? Fatty desperately told himself not to look in the direction of the convenience store. But things were going against her will. She couldn't control her gaze and looked to the left. At first, Wu Zhen didn't know he was looking at the convenience store because there were too many people and cars outside. Even the entrance of the convenience store was crowded. After a few seconds, she came back to her senses and smiled. Is he in the convenience store across the street? Oh no. He was really a troublemaker. Fatty slapped his head heavily. Chapter 572. Welcome. The shop assistant's voice rang out again. It had to be said that after climbing the ceiling and hearing such a gentle laughter, anyone's mood would improve. Fujio looked up and smiled at the shop assistant. Then, she walked back to her previous seat. She glanced at the table. No one had touched her things. Very good. Madam. At this moment, the shop assistant smiled and said, "This is for you." It was a cup of Odin, still warm. Fujio smiled faintly and raised her eyebrows. You remembered wrong. Before I went to the toilet, you already gave me a cup of Odin. No, this is not that cup. The shop assistant quickly explained, this cup was ordered by your friend. Friend? When Fujio heard that word, her back suddenly trembled, and only one word appeared in her mind. No. This friend of yours has been waiting for you for a long time. The shop assistant continued and said in confusion, he said that you should be hungry after climbing the ceiling. Fujio heard that and suddenly narrowed her eyes. Just at this moment, another voice came from behind her. It was deep and magnetic, like an explosion, but it made one's scalp tingle unconsciously. Why didn't you take it? Or am I wrong? You don't like Odin. Chinamo was still holding the cup of coffee in his hand, but he deliberately stood in the position that was blocked by the snack cabinet. Now that he walked out, he looked at the back of the girl in front of him and said slowly, Mr. Vlogger. There was no need to turn back. Fujio also knew who that person was. No wonder the police knew that she would come out from the vent. If all this was directed by the Almighty, then there was nothing more to say. Fujio heard the footsteps behind her getting closer and closer. Finally, she decided to strike first. Brother Mo, it's me. Chin Mo's footsteps suddenly stopped. He looked at the most familiar face and the pair of dark eyes in front of him. The shards of light seemed to fall into the other person's eyes, which were so beautiful that nothing could compare with them. It was him. It was actually him. Actually, it wasn't that Chin Mo didn't think of the youngster. But more than that, he thought that this case was related to Z. Was it just an imitation? Chin Mo frowned a little. Brother Mo, Fujio took another step forward and held Chin Mo's wrist with her left hand. I'll explain to you later. It's fine if you want to hand me over to the police, but you have to remember to pay to bail me out. No matter who it was, they would not be able to bear being dragged by such a beautiful girl. Chinamo had always believed that he would never feel pity. However, in the face of this guy, who was still saying that he could redeem him with money if he wanted to, Chinamo started to have selfish motives. His fingers tightened as he looked at Fujio from head to toe. Under his deep gaze were his thin lips that were inches away from hers. A young man dressed in female clothing. Only when he thought of these 5 words. It was as if something was out of his control. His blood surged with an indescribable heat. What's more, the guy in front of him was looking at him with watery eyes. He had long black hair, a white shirt, and the skin on the side of his face was like a fine white jade. Because he had just climbed through the ceiling, there was a faint blush on his face. No matter how he looked at it, he looked like a fairy. Just then, the glass door rang again. Chapter 573. Lin Feng wasn't the only one who was stunned. Even the Supreme Alliance members behind him froze for a moment. Didn't Captain have something important to do here? Was this what Captain was talking about? Most importantly, Captain had never had a woman by his side. Lin Feng pushed White Tiger. White Tiger's face showed that he didn't know either. Wu Zhen was the last to enter. When she saw the scene in the convenience store, her smiling face couldn't help but sink. Brother Mo, what are you doing? Did you catch the suspect? Fujio heard the commotion behind her and knew that many people had entered. In such a situation, if the Almighty was determined to expose her, She could only follow the police and think of a plan later. But before she could say anything, her left wrist was pulled back. Then, the familiar sandalwood scent of a man greeted her. Chin Mo didn't look at anyone. He put one hand on the bar table behind Fujio, and his whole body bent down. He didn't even care about the shock in her eyes as he kissed her deeply. That side profile was elegant and handsome. Through the convenience store's window, it was like admiring a romantic and aesthetically pleasing poster. Outside, the police sirens were still ringing. Fujio couldn't concentrate anymore. Behind her was the vast night sky. Other than the gasps around her, there was also the sirens outside. Her beating heart and his cold lips intertwined. That kind of kiss seemed to belong to him. It was domineering, strong, irresistible, and extremely long-lasting. Lin Feng didn't know what to say anymore. His eyes widened and his fingers stretched out. This. What the F***ck was going on? The moment he arrived, he saw Captain torturing a single dog. Yun, who didn't come back to his senses either. In fact, no one expected Chin Mo to do such a thing. Only the Almighty would respect someone who lowered his head and kissed like there was no one else around. Wu Zhen's eyes were red, filled with endless jealousy. Fatty was still holding the laptop in his hands. He was in a daze. No, wait a minute, didn't Captain tell him to separate and lock onto the target? The scene in front of him made him dizzy. Fujio was the one who was really dizzy. It was as if all the breath in her mouth had been stolen by the other party. Apart from the pleasant tobacco fragrance on the man's body, there was nothing else in her nostrils. His heart was beating faster because of the lack of oxygen. His fingers were kissed until the last bit of strength left his fingers. Only then did Chin Mo let go of the person in front of him. With both hands behind Fujio, he tilted his head slightly to the left and asked the person, "What's the matter?" Two very indifferent words. That low and deep voice, probably because of the kiss just now, still had a mesmerizing magnetism. He had a handsome side profile, deep eyes, and a matter-of-fact attitude. This made it hard for this group of people to reply. In the end, it was Lin Feng who was brave enough to jump forward and say, "Fatty said that you're waiting for him here. He has business to attend to." The others nodded, their gazes landing on Chin Mo's face. However, Chin Mo was very calm. He asked in a faint voice, "Isn't a date important?" "A date? Damn it. They must have misheard. Why would the captain go on a date with anyone?" At this moment, Lin Feng was even more curious about this girl, who hadn't spoken yet. Chapter 574. Unexpectedly, Chin Mo was one step ahead of her. He reached out and pressed the back of her head, pressing her into his chest, burying her face in his embrace. That hug was filled with domineering indifference. He glanced over with an extremely cold gaze. "What? Are you here to disturb my date? How dare he?" Lin Feng wished he hadn't stuck his head out just now. He smiled and said, "Captain, you can continue. Just pretend that we don't exist." The tip of Fujio's nose was pressed tightly against the man's chest. Underneath the windbreaker was a pure white cotton shirt. Her face was pressed against it, and she could feel the temperature under the shirt. She originally thought that such a person's body temperature was on the cold side, and it wouldn't be comfortable to hug him. After experiencing it twice, Fujio didn't think that way anymore. The Almighty's moderate body temperature and the tobacco scent on his body made it suitable to be brought home. The corners of his mouth curled up unconsciously. She knew that the Almighty was doing this to help her. His head moved forward involuntarily. What he meant was nothing more than a thank you. At this moment, the Almighty turned his head and pressed his thin lips against her ear. His voice was very deep. If you don't want others to see you cross-dressing, be good. It seemed like the Almighty didn't receive her gratitude at all. But this time, the Almighty had sacrificed a lot. If he hadn't said the word acting in advance, Fujio would have struggled out of the kiss. That uncontrollable numbness not only affected her thoughts, but it also drained her of all her energy. Fujio didn't know what to say. In the end, why did he have to kiss her? Hugging her was fine too. If it wasn't for the thing on her back, she might not even have been able to stand. Even now, her heartbeat had yet to return to normal. Also, what did Lin Feng mean by that? Continue watching her and the Almighty. She couldn't always be in this position with the Almighty, right? She reached out and tugged on Qin Mo's sleeve, lowering her voice. Brother Mo, let them go. Qin Mo held the back of Fujio's head, the corner of his lips curling up. In a voice that only the two of them could hear, he said, "It depends on your performance." What did he mean by watching her performance? Was he really going to be stared at for the whole night? Fujio was a little depressed. How long was he going to hold her? She knew Supreme Alliance all too well. Loves to gossip, especially the internal gossip of the members. If anyone had a girlfriend, they would want the whole company to know. After all, it was the monk battle team. I can understand. But if she was that girlfriend, Fujio's expression froze, and she tugged at the Almighty's sleeve again. Qin Mo wasn't in a hurry. He was indeed not in a hurry. Putting aside all the questions he needed to ask, he felt that this posture was very good. I never knew Captain was so lovey-dovey. Lin Feng tilted his head and whispered into Yunhu's ear. Yunhu didn't comment, only feeling that the entire situation was a little strange. Wu Zhen, who was standing by the side, clenched her fists tightly. When it reached a certain level, she bit her lips harshly. Brother Mo, Director Huang is waiting for your news inside. Qin Mo lifted his lids, his expression indifferent. I'll only help if you follow the rules. What rules? Wu Zhen didn't know anything and couldn't care less. She only had eyes for the person in front of her. Why? Why was it like this? She had been by his side for so many years. They were so close to having hope. Where did this woman come from? Wu Zhen's fingers sank into her palms, forming a series of crescent moons. Ah, I remember now. Chapter 575. Captain, this, cough cough, is the one from the Masquerade party, the one who acted as the demoness. Lin Feng became more and more excited as he spoke. He circled around the two of them. She looks like her from the side. Qin Mo glanced over at them as a warning, but he didn't deny it. This made Lin Feng even more certain. Captain, don't tell me you guys decided on a kiss. What? Can't I? Qin Mo raised a brow slowly. Lin Feng's jaw dropped. Was this even possible? Are you leaving or not? When Qin Mo's second sentence was heard, Wu Zhen's eyes narrowed. Why? What right did Brother Mo have to treat this woman like this over and over again? Who was she? If one could not get what they wanted, it would turn into resentment. He was referring to the current Wu Zhen. However, this wasn't something a person could experience. Wu Zhen wasn't like Azure. She knew when to advance and when to retreat. He couldn't do it openly. It was because she was familiar with that person's temper. He had to investigate the woman's background. That was Wu Zhen's only thought. Because she wouldn't give Brother Mo to anyone. At the very least, she wanted a fair competition. Wu Zhen didn't realize that the fair competition she was talking about was just wishful thinking. She took a deep breath, trying her best to stabilize her emotions. She told herself that there was still a long way to go. Since Brother Mo is busy, let's go. Leave. Fatty did not want to leave because his computer was reacting again. How could this be? Didn't we already locate the IP address? It was that black bow tie. Why was there a red web-like reminder on the screen now? The warning was silent. But one look at Fatty's expression and Chin Mo knew what he wanted to say. His voice became even colder. If you don't go out, do you want to stay and be a vegetarian for the rest of the week? Or do you want to practice your hand speed 24 hours a day? Hearing this, all the Supreme Alliance members froze. They collectively chose to retreat. Eating was the most important thing to Fatty, and when he moved his notebook, the red area disappeared again. Could there be a problem? Fatty didn't dare to ask for confirmation, for fear that he wouldn't have meat to eat in the future. He reached out and patted the notebook in his hand. Just like that, the Supreme Alliance was escorted out of the convenience store by the lovey-dovey Almighty. Lin Fang's expression was still a little blank. Do you guys think Captain is really in love? It's possible. Fatty was very serious. Otherwise, how could he not even care about the case? This was not the Captain's usual style. Lin Feng looked up at the sky sadly. I thought I would be earlier than Captain. I didn't expect that even the clouds in the sky would be picked by someone like Captain. I'm a down-to-earth sunflower, so why haven't there been any girls asking about me? Yun-Hu glanced at him. Lin Feng immediately placed his hand on his childhood friend's shoulder. Fortunately, Little Spade has a girlfriend. Otherwise, if he came with us to Pure Color, he would be so sad to see Captain kissing someone like that. Yun-Hu arched a brow and was about to speak. You don't have to say anything. I know everything. Lin Feng cut him off in a deep voice. I've never seen someone as emotional as Little Spade. I heard from his little butler that Little Spade gamed day and night for our captain to reach his current level. He stepped into a profession that he wasn't good at before, just for someone. This kind of emotion is worthy of admiration. Oh, Yun-Hu replied before continuing. Then why did he find a girlfriend if he likes Captain so much? He's sad. Lin Feng shook his head. Do you still remember the day of the costume party? I sent the photo of Captain kissing that girl to Little Spade. Little Spade didn't reply at first and only replied the next day with a line of 6,666. In the end, within a few hours, he found a girlfriend. I understand the feeling of liking a straight man but still having to watch him kiss someone else. Sigh, as a brother, I feel bad for him. This sounded very logical, and the timing was also right. But Yun-Hu glanced back in the direction of the convenience store. Was he the only one who thought that the girl's back was slightly similar to Little Spade's? Perhaps he was thinking too much. It shouldn't be that complicated. Captain didn't seem to be gay. Other than the Supreme Alliance members, there wasn't anyone else in the convenience store. This was because everyone was still surrounding Pure Color. The commotion caused by the live stream could be seen from the police cars speeding in from outside. Lin Feng was still puzzled. Who are they arresting? Why does it feel like something big has happened? Indeed, something big had happened. If it wasn't something big, Captain probably wouldn't be here. But Yun-Hu didn't tell Lin Feng this. Some things didn't have to be said out loud. But some things weren't. In front of the wooden table, Chin Mo was still in that position. But when he spoke again, his voice was deep. I'm waiting for your explanation. You don't have to hug me like this, right? Fu Jiu wanted to move. Chin Mo's expression was indifferent. They haven't gone far. Wu Zhen is still outside. Then I'll just hug you and explain. Anyway, the feeling of being hugged by the Almighty wasn't bad. In fact, it wasn't that Fu Jiu didn't lay the groundwork. The Almighty's appearance today had given her a wake-up call. He had returned to the crime squad. In the future, she had to be clear about who she was dealing with. I have to do this. That was Fujio's first sentence. Chin-mo raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything. He saw the person in his arms clench her fists. Those two bastards' target today is my girlfriend. Girlfriend. When he heard these 3 words, Chin-mo's left hand paused on the youngster's head, and his eyes darkened. Did this mean that the photos posted on the forum were real? Fujio was still acting like a boyfriend. Brother Mo, if it were you, would you be able to tolerate the girl you like being bullied like this? So I have to act. Even if your current actions might result in a lawsuit. Chin-mo felt the temperature in his heart drop. He was still hugging this person, but he felt that they were very far apart. Fujio's eyes turned black in that instant. That doesn't matter. Aren't they the ones who should be in jail? Even if it's them, let the police handle these matters. It was the first time Chin-mo was in such a situation. He looked straight into the youngster's eyes. You don't have to do this. Fujio didn't retreat, and her eyes were bright. I don't want to, but it's too late. Since Brother Mo has seen the live broadcast, you should know what kind of person that teacher is. With such a teacher by Mingran's side, I can't be at ease. Chin-mo looked at the evil person in front of him, as though he was analyzing her words. In the end, his fingers tightened, and the corner of his mouth curled up. What is this? The power of love. Yes. Fujio didn't deny it. But after hearing the word yes, Chin-mo's eyes changed. They became as deep as water, like the sea at night. They were moist, and people couldn't see through them at all. But Fujio clearly felt that he wasn't the same as usual. Brother Mo, Chin-mo's left hand suddenly grabbed the youngster's waist, and his voice was deep and cold. You better stop talking about that self-sacrificing love of yours. Fujio was quiet. The two of them didn't speak again. The surrounding temperature was very low. The shop assistant didn't dare to move forward. In the end, Chin-mo let go of his hand. There was no warmth in his eyes, and his side profile was very indifferent. How long have you been planning this? Quite a long time, before I went to Tokyo. Fujio knew she couldn't speak the truth now, and could only lower her gaze. I've always had feelings for Mengran. Brother Mo, you know how I used to be. There were many girls who looked down on me, but she didn't. Hence, after I recovered my true self, I've been paying attention to her. She loves to laugh and jump, and sometimes, she would stop when she sees something delicious, pulling people to look at it. I've never seen her unhappy, but I don't know when she started to be afraid, especially in school. Fujio's emotions were real when she said these words. Precisely because her emotions were real. Hence, Chin-mo wouldn't have guessed that the sheet Fujio was referring to wasn't Li Mengran, but the person who had left. He looked at the face in front of him, the gentleness brought by nostalgia. It made Chin-mo feel a little astringent. It was like the uncooked apricot meat he had eaten when he was young. It went down his throat, and it was hard to swallow. I wanted to wait until the National League ended. Fujio continued, her eyes revealing a deep darkness. I didn't expect them to be so shameless. When I found out that Mengran was afraid because of these people, I started to prepare. Yang Ming had conditions to threaten Mengran. If she didn't agree, he would probably make her fail. If the police were to investigate, it would be too late. Before I took action, I thought about many things, including waiting here. Brother Mo, do you remember? You were the one who told me that a convenience store like this had the best visual effect. I never expected to use it this time. Chin-mo chuckled, his lips turning cold. Should I praise you for being smart? Fujio knew he was angry, but in order to prevent the Almighty from finding out she was Z, she had to maintain this layer of disguise. Seeing that the youngster wasn't speaking, Chinemo stuffed a hand into his pocket, his voice nonchalant. You likely meant Grand so much that you're willing to dress up for her. Fujio opened her mouth, wanting to say that it was just a way to blend into the filming. But the Almighty didn't wait for her to finish, interrupting her. Fujio, for a girl, you're willing to forsake your own principles, am I right? This was the first time the Almighty had called her by her full name. Fujio lifted her head, looking at the man. Chinemo took out a lighter and a cigarette. He tilted his head and lit one. His deep features were shrouded in smoke, giving off an indescribable feeling. His reflection on the glass window seemed to be cold and desolate at the same time. Chapter 576. Fujio wanted to say that she had never given up on her principles. But at this time, the more he said, the more mistakes he would make. He could only remain silent. Too much time had passed. It was so long that she thought she would definitely be handed over to the police. Chinemo spoke again, his voice cold. If you don't want anyone to know about this, break up with your girlfriend. Fujio looked up, her thin lips slightly open. It's obvious that her existence isn't beneficial to you. Chinemo didn't give Fujio a chance to speak. He walked towards the youngster, and his eyes darkened. It's not good for the National League. Think carefully about what's important. After Chinemo said this, his tone softened. Come home with me now. A closed environment is better for your thinking. Fujio raised her eyebrows. Was the Almighty planning to take care of her personally? Not letting her go home, not handing her over to the police. He probably still had some doubts. But going back with the Almighty at this hour meant that she would have to sleep in his house. Fujio paused. She knew that it wasn't wise to reject him now. Fortunately, she was wearing women's clothing this time and had bandages wrapped around her chest. Otherwise, the Almighty would be suspicious of her identity from that brief encounter just now. Fujio was very clear that what she needed to do now was to maintain a newbie's attitude. She could have hacking skills, but she couldn't use them to do these things. She had to act naive. Hence, she basically followed him wherever he asked her to go. The man next to her was driving at a much faster speed than before. From the rearview mirror, he could still see the police car speeding past. It seemed like the Almighty really didn't want to hand her over to the police. But this time, the Almighty didn't bring her to the place she was familiar with. Brother Mo, what's this? Fujio looked up at the duplex buildings in front of her. Chinemo pressed the car key, his gaze deep. My own place. No, Brother Mo, you didn't find such a desolate place to lock me up, did you? Fujio said this, but she put her arm directly on Chinemo's shoulder. She had a handsome and evil smile on her face, and she didn't seem to be unfamiliar at all. Chinemo tilted his head and smiled faintly. What do you think? Fujio, oh no, it was really possible. It was too late to escape now. Go in. Chinemo pressed his fingers on Fujio's back and pushed her forward. He didn't use much strength, but it gave off an invisible sense of danger. Fujio's eyes couldn't adapt to the darkness. It's so dark. Chinemo looked at the person in front of him and suddenly bent down. Fujio's breathing quickened, and her eyes unconsciously fell on the Almighty's thin lips. Just turning on the lights. Chinemo put his hand on the wall behind Fujio. After sensing Fujio's gaze, he curled his lips into a mocking smile. What do you think I'm going to do? It's nothing. Fujio smiled without changing her expression. She looked at the handsome face in front of her that was exposed under the light without changing her expression. He was very close to her, and his breath was a little disturbing. Did she get kissing syndrome? When the Almighty lowered his head, she thought. Chapter 577. Her blood would flow differently when it came into contact with the coldness. Especially the blood flow to her heart, it seemed to slow down over time. Fujio tilted her head to avoid the fingertips that were disturbing her thoughts, but she still felt his breath on her lips. She rubbed it with the back of her hand and smiled. A little, Brother Mo, you always use your charm on me. Be careful, I might turn gay and ask you to take responsibility. Hearing that, Chin Mo's eyes deepened, but he still maintained that posture. Then take responsibility. Locking you up is just right. Fujio, are you serious? The Almighty had sacrificed so much just to interrogate her. How are you going to ask me to take responsibility? Chin Mo raised his eyebrows, gesturing for the person in front of him to continue. She was just saying it casually, she hadn't thought it through. Chin Mo saw through her thoughts with one look, and his eyes turned cold. He moved his left hand and lowered it a little. Hug. Kiss. Or, sleep. The man turned his face sideways, his breath and voice carrying a different kind of bewitchment. It was probably because the Almighty had such a strong sense of abstinence, so when he got involved with evil, he was like a demon that could confuse one's soul. This kind of interrogation was really unbearable. Fujio knew the hidden danger in that voice, so she took the initiative to admit her mistake. I don't dare to ask Brother Mo to take responsibility, it's my fault this time. Chin Mo raised his eyebrows, but he didn't move. Actually, I was hesitant when I planned it. Fujio looked up, her eyes bright. But I had no choice, someone had to expose it, otherwise, Chin Mo interrupted the youngster indifferently, as if he didn't want to hear that name. She could have asked the police for protection. Do you not trust the police that much? To be honest, a little. Fujio admitted it without hesitation because she knew she couldn't hide it from the Almighty. Chin Mo retracted his hand and looked at her. That's why you imitated Z's crime. Yes. Fujio's eyes flashed. As expected, the Almighty was suspicious, but no matter how smart he was, he couldn't have guessed that Z had been reborn, which was why he always thought she was imitating. Why did she feel that other than the fact that she had been reborn, she was better than the Almighty in every other aspect? Luckily, Fujio had already prepared an excuse for this. After talking to Brother Mo that day, I went to look up Z's information and found out that she had handled a similar case before. That case inspired me to a certain extent, and that's how I came up with the next plan. Even if it's a hacker, the first case he starts would be because something happened to someone important to him. Is that what you're trying to tell me? Chin Mo asked calmly. Fujio's fingers paused. The Almighty had even found out what was the first case she was involved in her previous life. As expected of an opponent like the Almighty. As soon as he encountered it, he had to adjust all his thoughts to face it. He had never felt this evenly matched before. Now that she had met him, it had stimulated her competitive spirit. But there was one thing. In the future, when the Almighty used his charm on her, she had to hold on. She couldn't be easily bewitched. I want to explain. Fujio looked into Chin Mo's eyes. Why did you make a move before the National League? She knew that the National League was very important to the Almighty. Not only to the Almighty, but to everyone in the Supreme Alliance. Chapter 578. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed, replying, so the National League and Li Mengran, which one is the most important to you? It was a multiple-choice question. Fujio couldn't figure out the thoughts of people in love. For instance, if she was really in a relationship with Li Mengran, she would definitely reply that Li Mengran was the most important. But Fu Jiu didn't want to lie. The National League. Fu Jiu added, but you know Li Mengran is my girlfriend. Qin Mo arched a brow. There isn't a girlfriend more important than the National League. At least for now. Fu Jiu felt that the Almighty's aura wasn't as cold as before. Qin Mo replied faintly, then it isn't that important. It is important. Fu Jiu wanted to let the Almighty know that she had a reason for taking action. Qin Mo didn't speak, but his eyes dimmed again. Then, he took off his jacket and threw it on the sofa, leaving only his white shirt on. He rolled up his sleeves and looked at Fu Jiu with his hands in his pockets. He didn't say anything, but his warning was very strong. Fu Jiu wasn't stupid. Noticing the change in the Almighty's gaze, she immediately kept quiet. Just this once. Qin Mo walked closer, his gaze deep beneath his long lashes. If there's a next time, I'll lock you up personally. Fu Jiu believed him, but from his words, he seemed to have accepted her excuse. Indeed, becoming Li Mengran's boyfriend was a solid excuse. The police would probably talk to Li Mengran. She was only worried about one thing. She hadn't expected to be caught by the Almighty. Hence, she couldn't make any calls. The last step of her plan was to tell Li Mengran not to tell the police about the other party. It wasn't that there would be any danger, but it was inevitable that the police would come to question her. Just as Fu Jiu was deep in her thoughts, she heard a deep and familiar voice. How long do you intend to wear this female outfit for? Fu Jiu lifted her lids, meeting the Almighty's calm gaze. The Almighty frowned slightly, as though he didn't like the way she was acting. Fu Jiu understood that a straight man wouldn't be able to accept a man in female clothing. The Almighty was just too straight. However, she wasn't sure. It wasn't that Qin Mo was too straightforward, but the way the person in front of him cross-dressed always made him want to do something extreme. Just like before he brought the youngster in. He had thought of too many ways to punish the young man. One of them was to obtain the young man. But he knew very well that once he did that, the two of them would never be able to go back. That was why he stopped. Unfortunately, a certain someone always appeared in front of him like this, without any self-awareness. I'll change it when I get home. Fu Jiu saw the Almighty looking at her, and she understood what he was trying to say. It was better not to dress up in front of the Almighty in the future, or it would remind him of those 2 kisses. Qin Mo tugged his collar open and turned his head. Did I say you could go home? Fu Jiu. Was he really going to sleep here? Chapter 579. Fu Jiu took off the sweater that was covering her eyes and didn't say anything. After all, it was safer to change back into men's clothes than women's. She didn't need to worry too much about the bandage on her chest. But if she was going to sleep with the Almighty again, she had to think of an extra layer of protection. So Fu Jiu didn't take off her singlet. But for her, the Almighty's clothes were a bit too big. Especially the sweater, the sleeves had to be rolled up 3 times. Qin Mo turned around with his glass in hand and saw the youngster in this state. He was still pulling up his pants, and his face under his silver short hair looked a little depressed, like a child who had stolen an adult's clothes. He leaned against the side, unruffled. Fu Jiu looked up and saw that the Almighty had no intention of helping at all. She curled her thin lips. This shirt is too big for me. Now you know you are short. Qin Mo took a sip of wine and said slowly, ceiling scholar. Fu Jiu's feet slipped, and she almost fell. Could the Almighty change his bad habit of giving random nicknames? Qin Mo looked down at his lit-up phone screen. Do you have an answer to the thing I asked you to think about? That thing. Fu Jiu pulled up her long sleeves. Which thing? Seeing this, Chin Mo put down his glass and walked over. He pulled the youngster's arm and rolled up his sleeves for her. His side profile was handsome and indifferent. "Break up." He enunciated each word in a calm voice. Fujio finally remembered that there was such a thing. But she couldn't agree too quickly, or she would expose herself. So she lowered her head and didn't speak. Chin Mo stopped with a faint smile. "Why? Can't bear to part with you. This is my first love in name." Fujio was telling the truth. "Brother Mo, I've confessed so many times, but this is the only time I've succeeded." Chin Mo tightened his grip. "You know how many times you have confessed to me?" Fujio paused. How could she mention it? This wasn't something to be proud of. "Anyway, it's my first time. Give me some time. This answer shouldn't be wrong." Chin Mo paused and said in a deep voice, "One day." "What?" Fujio looked up. Chin Mo continued to roll up the youngster's other sleeve. The curve of his face didn't reveal any emotions. "I'll only give you 1 day. Listen carefully, this is the limit." Fujio didn't speak immediately. Chin Mo didn't know how many times he had experienced this feeling today. The worry of hearing rejection. Worry? Since when did he have such inexplicable emotions? It wasn't that he didn't feel guilty. She used this as leverage to make the young man break up with her. It was just that he couldn't stand the fact that this guy belonged to a girl. Since it wasn't that important, then he would completely uproot it. Don't give anything a chance to sprout. This time, he had learned his lesson. In the future, the youth would only have him by his side. "All right." Fujio tried her best to show her emotions, and even her voice was hoarse. "I will try my best to forget." Chin Mo glanced at the head that was lowered, the fluffy silver hair swirling around it. He got the answer he wanted. However, he was not in a good mood. Because Chin Mo realized that if it was possible, he didn't want the youngster to be so disappointed. Chapter 580. I want to be alone. Fujio continued to pretend. "Go home and think about how to ask Mengran tomorrow. After all, I'm the one who wants to be with you." As soon as the words left her mouth, the temperature in the room was a bit low. Chin Mo didn't say anything. Just when Fujio thought she had gotten his consent, she turned to leave. Chin Mo reached out his hand and pressed it against the door frame, blocking Fujio's way. He bent his back and lowered his head to get close to her face. A warm breath fell on Fujio's ear again, and she felt an indescribable numbness. "I said I'm tired today." Chin Mo paused, and his tone carried a trace of indecipherable emotion. "Is it that bad?" "Of course," Fujio nodded. "A little. Then drink some wine." Chin Mo pulled the youngster back. "I'll stay with you." Fujio felt that she was one step behind again. She never thought that the Almighty would remember that he was her brother at this time. Anyway, she couldn't leave this time. The two of them opened a bottle of red wine. Fujio didn't drink much. The most important thing was to stay sober. Indeed, there was only one room here. The Almighty didn't even give her a chance to say that she wanted to sleep on the sofa. His eyes were indifferent. "You don't dare to sleep with me. What are you afraid of?" "Brother Mo, why do I feel that you are going to watch me 24 hours a day?" Fujio wasn't stupid. The Almighty wasn't like this for no reason. Chin Mo tilted his head and lit a cigarette. Then he took out his phone, unlocked it, and threw it to the person in front of him. Fujio looked at the message on the screen, and her eyes suddenly widened. There was only one line, no more, no less. Tomorrow at 8 in the morning, Z will take action. Fujio raised her eyebrows. The Almighty still hadn't completely dispelled his suspicion towards her. Stay here tonight. Chin Mo looked up. I won't be watching you 24 hours a day. Fujio smiled lightly. Okay, for my freedom in the future. This was indeed a chance to clear her name. But what did the person pretending to be her want to do? Fujio knew that the Almighty wouldn't say more. It was already extra that he let her read the message. But sleeping in the same room, on the same bed, was different from before. When the lights were turned off and the room was plunged into darkness, Fujio could still see the outline of her surroundings clearly through the moonlight. Fujio couldn't fall asleep even though she was fully clothed. How should he put it? Kissing and not kissing were indeed different. Fujio always felt that as soon as that familiar scent approached, the man's eyes when he kissed her lips would appear in her mind. It was very deep, like the sea. With this thought in mind, it was inevitable that he would want to retreat. His lips hadn't healed yet, so when the tip of his tongue slid across, he could feel a fine line on the wound. It's a little itchy. As Fujio thought about it, she moved back a little. Suddenly, the lights turned on. A tall shadow flipped over and loomed over Fujio's head. That oppressive sense of danger came again. The Almighty's breath was right above her, gently sprinkling down. Fujio felt an indescribable dizziness for the first time. The Almighty was looking at her at such a close distance that when their eyes met, she felt a chill run down her spine. Fujio had to face it head-on. Chapter 581. It's itchy, the weather is cold, and it's hard to get better. Plus, today. Fujio didn't finish her sentence, mainly because it was too embarrassing. After being kissed twice, there were still marks left. Chin Mo reached out his hand, wanting to touch it with his fingertips. What kind of joke was this, such a position? Fujio sat up directly, otherwise it would be too ambiguous. But in the end, she realized that after she sat up, the position was even more ambiguous. She didn't know what the Almighty was thinking, but the mirror was on the left side of the bed. Fujio tilted her head, just in time to see the two of them in the mirror. That incomparably handsome man had his knees against the bedsheets, his hands on both sides of her, his upper body close to hers, his shirt collar half open, revealing his muscular chest, his voice low and deep. What now, why don't you say it? Whether from his posture or his appearance, the Almighty's aura was too strong. Fujio didn't speak again, because she felt that a lot of inappropriate images would appear in her head just by looking at that scene. It was all because the Almighty was too handsome. That kind of abstinence could easily make people think the wrong way. He seemed to notice Fujio's gaze. Chin Mo tilted his head and followed her line of sight. In the mirror, the youngster was trapped under him. The collar of the pure white shirt was slightly askew, revealing a beautiful and delicate collarbone. His skin was white and clean, his thin lips were slightly open, and his eyes were even a little watery because of surprise. Chin Mo's eyes deepened when he saw that scene. In fact, whether the youngster was wearing women's or men's clothes, it didn't seem to affect his feelings towards this guy. If he wanted to tear off all his clothes, it would be best if he could leave his mark on every inch of this guy's body, not just his lips, but also his ears, neck, collarbone, and any other place that could be left. How strange, he clearly had the same body structure as him. But he couldn't stop that thought. He wanted this guy's legs to wrap around his waist, and he wanted to hear the youngster begging for mercy. Just like what he had thought before entering the room. He wanted to get this person and make him completely his. The sweet smell of the youngster's candy seemed to be urging him to do this. Even his blood was restless. He had already tasted the youngster, so he wanted more. But Chin Mo knew that once he did it, he would lose everything. Hence, he moved his palm slowly through the youngster's sweater, dragging her back inch by inch. "If you don't sleep, I don't mind throwing you out of the window. I'll show your fans that their beloved little spade not only knows how to scale walls and ceilings, he can also inhale smog. Or perhaps, I can teach you something else, like training your kissing skills, MMH." When she felt the warm breath getting closer and closer to her lips, Fujio realized that the textbooks were right. She had to avoid men with excessive hormones. Although the Almighty wasn't gay, what if he saw her too handsome and wanted to hit her? She definitely couldn't suppress him. "I'll sleep." Fujio tilted her head seriously, opened her eyes, and added, "Good night, Brother Mo." Chin Mo lowered his head, a look of silent patience flashing across his deep eyes. The youth didn't see her patience behind the black light. Chapter 582. Fujio heard the vibrating sound beside her. When she looked over, Chin Mo had already walked out of the room with his phone in his hand. The call was from Director Huang. His voice was a little deep. "This case is a little hard to determine. If you have time, come to the police station tomorrow." "Got it." Chin Mo hung up and glanced at the youngster. He didn't walk back and chose to sleep on the sofa. The next day, 8:00. Z on the internet took action as expected. It was just that the result was somewhat unexpected. The maiden sacrifice in the trailer didn't appear. But some of the images that were exposed still left the police in a terrible state. Fujio didn't have a deep sleep last night. When she woke up, she saw the news on TV. Chin Mo sat on the sofa and pressed the remote control with his fingertips. His tone was indifferent. "The person you are imitating seems to be aiming at the same thing as you." Fujio raised her eyebrows. "Brother Mo, are you talking about that Z? What do you think the maiden sacrifice in the trailer is talking about?" Chin Mo didn't answer her question. Fujio sat down. "I just woke up and you are testing me again. It's a case analysis." Chin Mo placed his hand on the youngster's head. "You are 80% free of suspicion. Are you happy?" That casual tone, was he really coaxing a child? Or was it just a perfunctory coaxing? Fujio suggested, "Can't you find the remaining 20%? It's 25% now." Chin Mo stood up. His side profile was handsome, and even his button-up posture was full of abstinence. "I don't like to bargain." Fujio. Inexplicably, it increased by 5%. "Go wash up and follow me to the police station." Chin Mo's voice sounded again. It was deep. Fujio was already standing in the bathroom. She lowered her head and squeezed some toothpaste. When she looked up, she met the man's eyes in the mirror. "What are we going to do?" "Get rid of your 20% suspicion." Chin Mo was leaning against the door frame. When the youngster brushed his teeth, he saw that the youngster seemed to avoid his upper lip. He frowned and walked over. He took the youngster's toothbrush and pinched his chin with one hand. "Open your mouth." There were still bubbles in Fujio's mouth, but she didn't think that it would affect her handsomeness. "I've never asked anyone to brush my teeth for me, even when I was young. I couldn't reach the sink, so I moved a stool and stood on it to brush my teeth. Do I need to praise you for being smart and buy you candy?" Chin Mo arched his eyebrows. Compared to the pressure, his movements were more gentle. "Don't talk, go drink some water." Fujio was very obedient at this time. She basically followed the Almighty's instructions. As the water entered his throat, it made a gurgling sound. At that moment, it was as if the first rays of dawn had become as gentle as water. Chin Mo had always known that the youngster had good skin. However, when the sun shone down on him, the skin on the side of his face was like white jade. His fingertips could still feel the softness and smoothness. He thought that he had really turned completely gay. Because it didn't matter what this guy looked like. He seemed to be starting to lose control of himself. The desire to possess him grew stronger and stronger. It was so strong that when he smelled the youth's aura, his fingers would heat up. But now was not the time to unleash the beast in his heart. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be friends. Chapter 583. At 9 a.m. At the entrance of the police station. There was an unprecedented number of media outlets waiting for news. I heard that someone has released news on the internet that they will be one step ahead of the police and find all the people involved in this case. Director Huang, is this true? There are also people who say it's a power exchange. High school students aren't incapable of distinguishing between right and wrong. Why did they agree to it? Is it because of the benefits? Where's the victim? Director Huang wasn't in a position to answer. Could the victim come out and say a few words? Fu Jiu frowned as she listened to the questions. She buttoned up her cap, entering the police station from the side door with the almighty. If Qin Mo's face were to appear in front of the media, it would definitely cause a commotion. Director Huang understood that, hence, he had arranged for someone to wait at a designated location. The moment Qin Mo entered, he rushed over. It's a troublesome matter, the victim. With that, Director Huang paused, turning towards Fu Jiu. This is my brother. Qin Mo's voice was calm. Speak, the media is already in a frenzy, nothing can be kept a secret. Director Huang wanted to ask when he had a brother, but it wasn't the right time to ask. He glanced at Qin Mo, lowering his voice. The victim's family is here. It seemed like the problem was with the victim's family. The intelligent Qin Mo instantly understood Director Huang's intentions. The two of them followed Director Huang into the lounge. Li Mengran wasn't the only one sitting there, her mother was there as well. She seemed to be in a daze, unable to accept the sudden turn of events. Wu Jin sat at the side, taking down the statement as though she was making a final confirmation. You're saying that Teacher Yang has always been nice to your daughter? When Fu Jiu heard this question, her hands, which were hidden under her sleeves, started to move. Her eyes turned very dark. Little Wu. Director Huang walked over. Didn't I tell you not to take a statement for now? Wu Jin hadn't slept the entire day and was exhausted. Just as her face was about to sink, she caught sight of Qin Mo, her voice turning hoarse. A bunch of media outlets are waiting for the outcome of this case. Director Huang, we have dragged this for too long, we have to give everyone an explanation. Besides, the public has the right to know. The public? Li Mingran's mother seemed to have woken up. You mean to tell everyone about this? Wu Jin comforted him. This is normal procedure. To file a case for investigation, the victim must file a lawsuit. When did we say we were going to sue? Li Mingran's mother stood up agitatedly. If this gets out, how is my daughter going to stay in school? The neighbors will start gossiping, wondering why I have such a daughter. Haven't you considered the consequences? Why do you have to make it public? No one noticed. While she was saying this sentence, Li Mingran's eyes dimmed. Perhaps she should have listened to that person and left last night. In that case, people would always remember that she died to show her determination. Not like now, facing countless cameras and people's curiosity and speculation, as well as her mother's reaction, Auntie. Chapter 584. The main point isn't what you're saying. The youngster's handsome face reflected the light from the window. The main point is how you're going to protect your daughter when she's being bullied. Motherly paused, her expression turning ugly. What do you mean by this? Does an outsider have the right to listen in? Where's the privacy of the commoners? Director Huang didn't know how to reply. Wu Zhen was professional, glancing at Qin Mo before turning to the youngster. Those unrelated to the case, please leave, don't disturb us. Qin Mo furrowed his brows. Fu Jiu laughed, her lips curling into a mischievous smile. Who says I'm unrelated to the case? The victim is my girlfriend. As an unofficial family member, please record a statement for me. Wu Zhen gulped. Motherly glanced at Li Mengran before turning to Fu Jiu, her chest heaving. She took a deep breath. My decision is to protect my daughter. You're all too young, you don't understand gossip, no one wishes for such a thing to happen. Fortunately, nothing happened to Mengran and I trust the police. Even if my daughter didn't stand up for them, they would still be locked up. Didn't they expose their crimes on the live stream? In less than a year, you'll be taking your college entrance exams. If this matter blows up, it would definitely affect Mengran, so, we don't intend to press charges. She said the last sentence with great difficulty. Her decision caused the room to sink into silence. After that, Qin Mo's voice was clear and cold. Whether to press charges or not is up to the victim, not the victim's family. Li Mingran's eyes were still on Fu Jiu, the youngster standing under the sunlight. Li Xiqing's mother pulled her hand. Her meaning was clear. Li Mengran inhaled deeply, swallowing the words that were so bitter it hurt. In the end, she chose to submit. Yes, we don't intend to press charges. In that instant, Li Mengran was afraid of seeing disappointment in the youngster's eyes. But she wasn't. That person looked at her. His gaze was as gentle and clear as water, just like in the past. Humans would always tolerate everything for the sake of those important to them. Even if it was a heart-wrenching grievance. Hence, regardless of Li Mingran's decision, Fu Jiu would support them. Motherly also felt bad. She pressed her daughter's hand and said, I'm sorry. All parents love their children. It was just that they were all different. If it were her, even if Honghua had to spend all her money and suffer all the finger-pointing, she would still fight for her. It was obvious that Motherly was still afraid of something in her heart, so she didn't dare to say anything. Fu Jiu had already considered that when she first started her plan. Li Mingran's father's unit was just below Deputy Liu. There was nothing wrong with doing so. Perhaps, as Motherly said, they were still too young to understand what it meant to be a fearful person. Li Mengran had a long road ahead of her. If this matter was really exposed, she would have to bear this label for the rest of her life. Fu Jiu had to admit that this was the reality. That was why so many people chose not to say anything, not because they were weak, but because they wanted to live a good life. Chapter 585. Fu Jiu's eyes darkened as she watched Li Mingran's bent back. At that moment, it was as if something in the depths of his heart was about to collapse. If it wasn't for the penetrating voice behind him, he would have been dead. Perhaps, it would really turn completely black. There's no need to sue. Let's go through the public prosecution process. Fu Jiu looked back and saw that Qin Mo had unbuttoned his shirt collar with his fingers. He had a pen in his hand and was ticking off another statement. His eyes were deep. The public prosecution will not reveal the victim's information, and there will be no public hearings. As for those scumbags who hurt you, I will make sure they will never get out of prison. Hearing this, Li Mingran's body shook. If I don't see that scene, I won't be able to rest in peace. Am I right? Qin Mo lifted his head, his thin lips moving slightly. The maiden's sacrifice. Li Mengran was stunned, looking at the legendary Almighty Qin in disbelief. Young Master Qin, how do you know my forum ID? No, I didn't know it was a forum ID. Qin Mo's voice was still calm. I just guessed that these words might have something to do with you. I've studied psychology, so what I'm going to say next might be very direct. It's not a good idea to use death to prove one's sincerity. Your family and those who aren't your family will be very sad. Fu Jiu's name was called out without any warning. Qin Mo continued, yesterday, I asked him to break up with you and he cried the entire night. Fu Jiu, this morning, he called for my brother and asked me to bring him to you. Qin Mo's tone was indifferent. Those who didn't understand would really believe it. Motherly started to look towards Fu Jiu. Director Huang looked as though he hadn't expected high school students to be so infatuated with each other. Only Li Mengran knew that was impossible. Seeing the youth's dazed expression, she laughed. I didn't expect me to be so important to him. Qin Mo replied calmly, it's very important but it's only for today. He will break up with you tomorrow. Enjoy it. Hey. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. Brother Mo, shouldn't I be the one to break up with him? I'll give you the chance now. Qin Mo crossed his arms in front of his chest, looking handsome and noble. Go ahead. Fu Jiu continued to raise her eyebrows. For some reason, Li Mengran felt much more at ease upon seeing this. It was probably because the two of them were standing together. Every word they said seemed to be unintentional, but in fact, they were trying to enlighten her. Or that sentence, I will make sure that they will never be able to get out of prison. It gave her a great shock. In fact, they were obviously two people with different styles, but their worldviews were very similar, right? Mengran. Fu Jiu walked towards the girl who was still standing there. Everyone thought that it was just an ordinary breakup. Unexpectedly, the young man suddenly stretched out his arms and pulled her into his embrace. Even Qin Mo hadn't expected this. Therefore, when Fu Jiu made this move, Qin Mo's hand, which had been twirling his pen, stopped. On the other hand, Li Mengran's eyes overflowed with joy because of this hug. Chapter 586. Not far away, Qin Mo watched as the two of them hugged. He couldn't help but tighten his grip on the pen. He thought it would only take a while. But when the youngster turned over, whispering into Li Mengran's ear, that scene prompted Qin Mo to take action. Li Mengran nodded, but before she could say the word okay, she felt the youngster's arm being pulled away. It was Qin Mo. He was still holding on to the youngster's wrist, with no intention of letting go. His voice was deep and pleasant. Take care. It was obvious he wanted to send her off. Li Mengran paused, breaking into a smile. This time, she really walked out. After she left, Qin Mo glanced over, his tone cold. Qin Mo tilted his head, his tone slightly cold. I asked you to break up, I didn't ask you to rekindle your old feelings. It's because we're breaking up, that's why I had to hug you. Fu Jiu replied seriously. Otherwise, how would I be able to justify crying the entire night yesterday? Qin Mo arched a brow. So that hug was to shut me up and not because you couldn't bear to. Both. Fu Jiu hadn't forgotten that she had just broken up with her boyfriend. Qin Mo repeated slowly, all of them. Seems like it isn't unimportant. That's why I want to know how to proceed with the prosecution. Fu Jiu glanced at Qin Mo. The importance in the youngster's eyes was clear. Qin Mo was filled with jealousy. That was right, he was jealous. He had thought about it countless times. If he had discovered the youngster's feelings earlier, he would have been able to stop it. But in the end, the seed was planted, wasn't it? You don't have to interfere, you've already done so much. Just bring me the evidence you found. Don't forget, you're still a 20% suspect. Chin Mo's gaze was still calm. Fujio lowered her voice. It really wasn't me. Other than the hacker forum, I haven't been on any other forums. You can get Fatty to check my search history. Honestly, I suspect there's something wrong with the forum. I will. Chin Mo only gave the youngster 2 words. Fujio knew from Li Mingran's words, she wasn't the only one who had caught onto the forum ID, the Almighty was also collecting evidence. That was why the Almighty was so frightening. He was clearly comforting someone, but at the same time, he was able to obtain information. That kind of innate bookworm instinct was very powerful. This made Fujio want to take the Almighty home and raise him. Deep in thought, Fujio didn't notice that Chin Mo's hand had been holding her wrist without loosening. But Chin Mo noticed it and caught Director Huang's curious gaze. But so what? It was easy for Chin Mo to pretend he didn't see it. Even if there was a seed in one's heart, it would not sprout if there was no water. Moreover, from now on, this person would only belong to him. With one hand in his pocket and the other holding the youngster's hand, he walked into the interrogation hall. His indifferent expression made Director Huang feel as though he was overthinking things. Wasn't it just holding hands after whispering to each other? This was very normal. Director Huang tried his best to convince himself since the case was more important. However, there was one person who he could not convince. That was Wu Jin. Although that person did not reveal any of his emotions. But she saw his right hand gripping the pen tightly. In an instant, Wu Jin recalled the CP topics on the internet. Chapter 587. Call your bureau chief over. The 2 men locked up didn't know about the live stream. Hence, Deputy Liu felt that with his influence, he would be able to turn the matter into a small one. But it was a pity he was facing Chin Mo. This Deputy Liu had just been transferred over, so he didn't know young Master Chin. Otherwise, he wouldn't have such an attitude. Deputy Liu glanced at the interrogator, his fingers almost touching the man's face. You must have just graduated. You can't make decisions on my matters, someone else. Fujio stood at the side, thinking that Deputy Liu wouldn't survive the night. Of all people, he had provoked the Almighty. Chin Mo's expression didn't change. He lowered his head and wrote a few words, reminding him calmly, Deputy Liu, this is the police station. Deputy Liu chuckled. Of course I know this is the police station. Let me ask you, do you know who I am? Chin Mo swept him a glance and knocked on the table, gesturing for the person beside him to record. Seeing this, Deputy Liu narrowed his eyes and took a step back. I won't say anything before my lawyer arrives. Then you can rest assured that your private lawyer won't be able to come. Chin Mo placed his pen down, his side profile handsome. With that, Deputy Liu felt a sense of unease. It was probably because of the other party's aura. Deputy Liu couldn't help but ask, I request to speak to my lawyer. The 2 police officers who were taking notes looked at each other. Let him call. Since Chin Mo had spoken, Director Huang naturally nodded. Deputy Liu hurriedly reached for the phone. It rang twice before he picked up, but before he could speak, a panicked voice sounded. Deputy Liu, it's bad. The people from the Discipline Inspection Department suddenly barged in, saying that they want to investigate you. Did your bank account outside get exposed? I told you that those women are unreliable, but you didn't listen. Our matter. Wait a minute, you can't touch that. What followed was a buzzing sound. Caw. Chin Mo played with the lighter in his hands, his tone faint. Seems like you have a lot of crimes. Now we have all the evidence. Deputy Liu finally realized what a stupid thing he had done. But why did the discipline inspection team have to come to his lawyer's house at this time? Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? Only Fu Jiu knew that this wasn't a coincidence. The Almighty had always been like this. Every word he said had a purpose. He must have calculated the time and felt that it was about time, so he let Deputy Liu walk into the trap and led him to make that call. If the crime of violating a minor wasn't enough to punish this beast, then add another. So from the start, the Almighty's goal wasn't simply to keep them in prison, but to sentence them to death. Just like that, in front of Deputy Liu, Qin Mo made a call. You don't have to investigate that lawyer anymore. Investigate all the women Liu Aigua has been in contact with, especially those with bank accounts. Instantly, Deputy Liu's face turned as white as snow. You. Qin Mo stood up, replying slowly, I'm going to call our director, Director Huang. Director Huang. He had been standing there all along. Take good care of him. Qin Mo wasn't being courteous. When Deputy Liu heard this, he slumped into his chair, completely losing the domineering aura he had before. Chapter 588. Deputy Liu had never seen someone who could communicate with the Commission for Discipline Inspection and command the entire police station. He was confident in his understanding of the police process. Moreover, he knew that with his status, no one would do anything to him. However, the other party had played such a trick on him. It was really unexpected. He was still waiting to use his connections. At the very least, if he had a good relationship, even if he lost his high position now, he could still go back to a small county and be a local tyrant. He had been afraid of being exposed, which was why he had placed all the money he had embezzled over the years on the periphery. Now that it was exposed, Deputy Liu clenched his fists, his eyes bloodshot. He glared at Qin Mo, wanting an answer. But Qin Mo didn't even turn back. He only said, the person who will send you to hell. Deputy Liu's body trembled. He had never imagined that he would end up like this. Because to him, sleeping with a high school student wasn't a big deal. Even if the other party didn't agree, they could discuss it later. Moreover, with his position, who would dare to cause trouble? But why was it different this time? The other Chief Shang had the same thoughts as him. Perhaps that was the reality. It was easy for those with power to get a girl. Chief Shang was an example. In reality, even if he didn't force anyone, there would still be many girls who wanted to be with him. There were many young models among them. But Chief Shang felt that he had a high moral character and wasn't willing to sleep with those girls. He liked pure girls. At the start, he had indeed spent money to buy them. After all, some high school students were more open-minded. As long as the money was sufficient, there wouldn't be a problem. But later on, the more he slept with them, the more he felt that the girls who rejected him were truly beautiful. Hence, he slept with them for a few days. In the past, there had never been any major incidents. Oh right, there was only one. At that time, he was having too much fun when he slept, and he played too much, so he accidentally made the other party miserable. She had an older brother who had been causing trouble. At that time, he had been climbing up and couldn't afford to have any problems with his style. Hence, he had gotten a group of people to smash her fruit stall. It was said that her brother's leg had been broken. But he didn't care, as long as no one died and it served as a warning, it was enough. But this time, why did the police dare to barge in? Chief Shang was much smarter than Deputy Liu. His attitude toward admitting his mistake was very good, and even his words were tactful. I did not follow the standard of leading by example, and I blame myself. I am willing to compensate the victims, but there is one thing that I wish for the police to be fair to me. I did not force anyone, I just made a mistake that any normal man would make. I did not resist the temptation and should not have engaged in this kind of business. That's right, the hardest thing to deal with was this excuse of his. In terms of shamelessness, we are usually not as shameless as these men. When he lowered his eyes, he was still saying, I'm willing to accept this complaint, but I'm very clear that I've paid for it. I understand the difference in nature. If that's the case, why would the victim have a knife? Can't you see that she doesn't want to? Chapter 589. He was changing the nature of the entire incident. Since the incident couldn't be denied, he wanted to change the nature of the incident. That way, the sentence would be light. Everyone who knew the law knew Chief Zhang's intentions. Perhaps that was why Motherly hadn't filed a lawsuit. She was afraid of powerful people who knew the law. They knew when and where to find people from which department to do what kind of things. In the end, even a very big matter might disappear due to a lack of evidence. That wasn't the scariest thing. But when it came to court, the female would be the target of all sorts of speculations. For example, it might be that she wasn't a good person or that she had received money, since there were examples of such cases. In that case, the victim would become the seller. No mother would be willing to let her daughter endure such things. Because she was aware of how shameless some people could be. They could turn black into white. Qin Mo listened to the conversation, glancing at Fu Zhou. Did Li Mengran receive money from the other party? No, but Fu Zhou knew where the problem lay. Yang Ming's tablet is still with Motherly, she said it was for the child to learn better, hence the practice questions. Qin Mo continued to watch the youngster. Fu Zhou's fingers moved slightly. The tablet is the latest model, it costs more than 6,000 yuan. Got it. Qin Mo's tone was calm. A fatal piece of evidence. During the court hearing, Chief Zhang can say it's the transaction fee. Fu Zhou glanced over. Ordinary people wouldn't think it's a trap. Qin Mo didn't speak. The two of them just stood there, tall and slender. Suddenly, they spoke at the same time. That would depend on who bought the tablet. I need a laptop to check on the buyer. Director Huang, who was standing by the side, was taken aback by their tacit understanding. The silver-haired youngster smiled faintly, extending his right hand. Qin Mo cooperated, his lips curving upwards. The two of them exchanged glances, high-fiving handsomely. Director Huang. Why did he feel as though he was useless? He couldn't help but ask Qin Mo. Qin Mo raised his hand and glanced at his wrist, nonchalant. There are, for example, can you order a meal for us? We don't want ordinary takeaway, we can't get used to gutter oil, order from Gourmet Mountain. Gourmet Mountain. Director Huang's eyes widened. Can't you eat something so expensive? Qin Mo arched a brow. Is it expensive? Director Huang stated his stance. I'm an upright official. The basic salary is enough for 3 meals. Qin Mo patted his shoulder. Director Huang. Why did he have to find such a person to solve the case? Just 1 meal had cost him 10 days' worth of salary. Fu Zhou also stood over. Think about the reporters outside. They are waiting for the case to be closed. Wait a minute, Qin Mo patted my shoulder because he was familiar with me. What was the meaning of this overly handsome guy patting my shoulder as well? I am a bureau chief. At this time, no one cared whether he was the bureau chief or not. They wanted to find the most useful evidence in the shortest time possible. That was what Qin Mo and Fu Zhou thought. One of them wrote down the key points of the evidence, while the other took a notebook and sat together in the director's office. The reporters outside were still interviewing the police officers. Chapter 590. Wuzhen saw the two of them go in together. But Director Huang had ordered that no one was allowed near his office, so Wuzhen could only watch from outside. Therefore, Wuzhen could only watch from the outside. That feeling made her feel terrible. She had thought that she could use Z's information to get that person back into the crime squad so that they could fight side by side. That was what she wanted the most. She had even chosen this profession just to be closer to that person. But now, Fu Jiu had popped up. The reason why he didn't let anyone near his office was because he didn't want anyone to know that the youngster's hacking skills had reached the pinnacle. The network attack during the selection contest wasn't much. It was the ability to break through the security network and retrieve all of Yang Ming's transaction records that was fatal. If anyone saw the youngster, they would know. It was inevitable that someone would link the live broadcast to Fu Jiu. It was enough that Director Huang knew about it. Qin Mo didn't trust anyone else. Both of them were busy. Only the rustling of pens and the crisp sound of keyboards could be heard in the office. In the past, Fu Jiu would never have thought that one day she would work together with her nemesis who had almost caught her. Once they worked together, Fu Jiu realized that everything went smoothly. She didn't need to think about the minor details. The Almighty seemed to be better at logical things than she was. She just needed to use her hacking skills. In the past, she only needed to break into two places to retrieve a person's spending records. One was the assets under the person's name and the corresponding bank. Then, she could look for information on his credit card. It was common sense that not many people would use cash to buy an electronic product that cost more than 6,000 yuan. But now, there was Alipay and WeChat. Hence, Fu Jiu needed to break into two trading platforms at once. The food had been sent in. Director Huang personally carried 4 dishes and a soup into the office. There were both meat and vegetables, which whetted one's appetite. Actually, Qin Mo wasn't that particular at times like this. But now that he had the youngster, he was still growing. Hence, Qin Mo wasn't careless when it came to food. After writing down the last key point, he put down his pen and glanced at the youngster in front of the computer. His slender and fair fingers were still typing quickly, and his eyes did not move away from the screen. The facilities in the director's office were not bad. Qin Mo first went to the bathroom to wash his hands, then glanced at the young man. Seeing that Fu Jiu was still in the same state, he bent down and opened the lunchbox that belonged to the young man. Director Huang watched from the side, muttering in his heart. When did Qin Mo learn how to take care of others? Wasn't he a pampered young master? Director Huang was well aware of Qin Mo's misophobia. "Let's eat first," Qin Mo said. "I'm busy." Fu Jiu didn't even raise her head. Her silver hair fell down, and her eyes were fixed on the displayed code. Director Huang's eyes lit up. This little rascal was impressive, he actually rejected Qin Mo's care. Not bad, not bad. If such a person entered the police station, there would be people who wouldn't be afraid of Qin Mo. Awesome. But that wasn't what surprised him the most. After eating a few mouthfuls of food, Qin Mo shifted his chair over. His gaze swept over the screen, and then he looked at the youngster's tightly pursed lips. Chapter 591. Fu Jiu, who was focused on the network attack, didn't know what it was. She opened her mouth subconsciously and didn't reject him at all. She even muttered to herself, "Break into this trading platform, and all his accounts will be exposed. First, we have to avoid their firewall, then plant a virus in them, and try not to be discovered when we retreat. MMH, Chin Mo replied as he handed the youngster another mouthful of rice. Director Huang was dumbfounded. What was going on? Fu Jiu opened her mouth without hesitation and chewed 2 mouthfuls. She looked like a cat that was being fed. Even with her noble bloodline, she still looked adorable. Chin Mo's lips curled up a little. Just like that, he ate a mouthful and fed the youngster a mouthful. That handsome side profile didn't seem out of place. Director Huang really wanted to yell at this person. Hey, I'm still here. Can't you pay attention? Something wasn't right. Why did he feel like he had discovered a huge secret? Even if Chin Mo had introduced him as his younger brother, Chin Mo wouldn't be able to recognize him. Fine, he would just treat him as his little brother. He never knew that Chin Mo had a brother complex. Director Huang's mind was in a mess. He wanted to squat in a corner and smoke a cigarette to calm himself down. But that overly handsome silver-haired youngster lifted his eyes. Found it, that tablet is under Yang Ming's name and has nothing to do with that Zhang guy. He bought it last year, before he came to number 1 middle school. Before Fu Jiu could finish her sentence, she saw a piece of tender beef appear in front of her lips. The closest thing to her line of sight was Chin Mo's face, which was as abstinent as a god's. For a moment, she felt like she was being bewitched. After Fu Jiu opened her mouth, she realized that she had naturally eaten the food that the Almighty fed her. For the first time in her life, she experienced what it meant to be a feast for the eyes. She also discovered the Almighty's new skill, which allowed him to feed her when she was busy. The main thing was that the Almighty's face was so good that she could eat an extra bowl of rice. Chin Mo saw that the youngster didn't reject the feeding, and there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. It seemed like this method of turning him gay was very effective. Since it doesn't belong to Zhang Huaqiang, it can't be used as evidence. Moreover, they didn't buy it at the same time, so it's even more impossible for them to turn the tables. Fu Jiu nodded and didn't forget to chew on the rice. Chin Mo passed the chopsticks in his hand over, his voice deep and pleasant. Finish your meal, we're going to teach Chief Zhang a lesson. All right. Fu Jiu sat on the chair and smiled. The way she ate with her head tilted could not be more obedient. Director Huang only wanted to say one thing, Chin Mo, young Master Chin, your brother is done with his work and his hands are free. You really don't need to continue feeding him. Fu Jiu also noticed this problem, and she reached for her chopsticks. Brother Mo, I'll eat by myself. I eat faster. It's gone. Chin Mo put down the lunchbox, his voice calm. Fu Jiu took a look, and it was indeed empty. The Almighty probably felt that it was too troublesome to pass the last 2 chopsticks to her, so he simply gave them to her. The Almighty definitely wanted to end this quickly and didn't want to waste time on eating. As expected, his worldview was upright. One had to admit that someone had really misunderstood Almighty Chin this time. Chapter 592. Director Huang had just calmed down after being forced to feed a huge bowl of dog and wolf. He decided to treat himself with food. After all, that was 10 days of his salary. But before he could pick up his chopsticks, Chin Mo had already stood up. He tidied his clothes and said slowly, Director Huang, let's go. Director Huang held a cauliflower in his mouth, looking confused. I've already opened my lunchbox and you're telling me we're leaving. Can you even do that? The youngster watched Director Huang's expression and walked over, patting his shoulder. Director Huang. These 2 rascals, they even bullied him so tacitly. In the interrogation room, Director Zhang was still thinking about his next step. He had already thought of a backup plan. As long as he insisted that the other party had accepted his money, the person who would be suppressing the matter wouldn't be him but the other party. Girls cared about their reputation the most. Besides, the other party was a high school student. There were many more things to consider. Even if the girl wasn't clear about it, her parents would be. Hence, Director Zhang wasn't worried about the victim's rebuttal. All of this was thanks to the girls who had accepted his money before. With the former, the nature of the matter had changed. Director Zhang lowered his lids. Even though his political career would be greatly affected, it didn't matter. After a few years, when no one paid attention to this matter, the topic would naturally die down. When that time came, he could borrow the power of his father-in-law's family to regroup. It wasn't impossible. In the end, it still depended on the influence of the media. The reason why Director Zhang sat still was because he believed there would definitely be some people here who would speak up for him. Otherwise, if he were to fall, the interests of that group of people would also be affected. Some time passed. The police station was surrounded by many interviewers. They could clearly see some anchors holding microphones, facing the camera and saying something. Director Huang, the reporters outside are asking for information, saying that they want to know if the news on the internet is true. Before he could finish his sentence, the reporters rushed in, raising their microphones in front of Director Huang, not giving him a chance to react. There are so many girls in this industry, shouldn't we start from within the school to improve the students' morals? Besides, our station is suspecting that the live stream on the internet is a publicity stunt. The girl with the knife hasn't shown her face yet. If she was really wronged, why didn't she say anything? At the very least, she should have shown her face. What is she afraid of? Is she afraid that her lies will be exposed? The reporters came so fast that they almost got a photo of the two of them. It had to be said that these two people were indeed very skilled. With a flash, they stuck themselves to the walls on the left and right at the same time. Both of them were as handsome as ever. Director Huang's rotund body was suitable as a cover, but his brows furrowed when he heard the reporter's question. We are still in the process of confirming the matter. Please stop your guesses. Chapter 593. We will try our best to contact the girl in the video who claims to be the victim. Of course, whether she is innocent or not will depend on the final outcome. Director Huang's chest heaved with anger. Didn't these people learn Chinese? Didn't they understand what he meant? Why did they have to twist his words? In reality, how could the reporters not understand him? But what exactly did the audience want to see? The truth? No, what they wanted to see was one reversal after another. The more unexpected it was, the more attention it would garner. To the media, the most important thing was how to grasp the topic. Besides, their station had sent out a vague message to create words that were beneficial to Director Zhang. They couldn't possibly go against their leader's wishes. Upon seeing this, Fu Jiao and Qin Mo exchanged glances. Both of them were smart enough to see through the trickery. When Director Huang appeared again, he was fuming with anger and sweat. His lips were dry from speaking too much and his clothes were wrinkled from being squeezed. It wasn't easy for him to escape, but when he saw that the two youngsters were still clean like the rich kids in the comics, he felt even more stifled. But no matter how stifled he was, he still had to get down to business. The public opinion isn't in favor of the victims. Director Huang was concise. Some of them were willing, and quite a few of them. In the end, it's all because of the name list provided by Z. Unlike Qin Mo, who already knew about this, Fu Jiao arched a brow. When Fu Jiao heard this, she arched a brow. What name list? Some girls who would cling on to rich men. There were also high school students who were with Zhang and many of them were willing. Now, the other party is using this point to reverse the situation and the media is using this as a new topic. If the incident hadn't been exposed, everything would have been much easier to solve. This C is really. Is she helping Zhang? She isn't helping Zhang, she just hates those girls more than this one. Qin Mo's voice was calm, without any special emotions. Fu Jiu listened by the side, her eyes dimming. No one knew what she was thinking. Director Huang rubbed his throbbing temples. This matter is getting more and more difficult. There's nothing difficult about it. Qin Mo turned, his face handsome. Call for a press conference, invite the mainstream media in Jiang City, twist the public opinion. Director Huang widened his eyes. How? I'll tell you what to say. Qin Mo had one hand in his pocket. Send the notice. Director Huang wanted to glare again. Who exactly was the director? As soon as they heard that there was going to be a press conference, almost everyone with cameras came to the scene. Director Huang stood there, exuding his authority. Qin Mo didn't need to teach him that. If you have any questions, you can ask them one by one. However, there is one thing you must report truthfully. If any media outlet interferes with their own speculations, I have the right to suspect that they are covering up for someone or plagiarizing the topic. Regardless of the situation, I will issue an arrest warrant. As soon as he said this, there were at least 3 reporters who had already edited the headlines out of the document. Director Huang arched a brow. Let's enter the official Q&A session. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.